In fact, CMHC, our housing authority, predicted there would be a 14% reduction in housing prices. Made sense to predict that at the time. But then, all of a sudden, in May of 2020, real estate prices started to rise. Why? In the middle of a lockdown? When people can't even go and see the properties that they are buying? What do you get? Jobs without people and people without jobs. And he replicates the same disastrous policies that have led to so much social and economic division south of the border. Here on this side of the House of Commons, we don't believe in central bank money printing to pay our bills. During the Great Global Recession, we rejected that approach. Governments around the world decided to do it. Here in Canada, we did run modest deficits, the smallest in the G7, but we did it borrowing real money and returning quickly to a balanced budget, which meant we had low inflation and low unemployment and the fastest recovery from the Great Global Recession. It turns out that sound money does not just keep inflation low, it allows growth and job creation. We know that inflation doesn't just eat away at paychecks, it kills jobs. For example, we now have among the highest unemployment in the G7, combined with 1 million vacant jobs. Can you imagine that? High unemployment and record high job vacancies? Well, no wonder. When they print money to pay people not to work, what do you get? So, yes, the financial elites are thrilled with quantitative easing. They've loved it in the United States of America, but Washington and Wall Street love quantitative easing. It's the one thing that gets bipartisan support in Washington, right? Republicans love ballooning Wall Street, and Democrats love ballooning Washington. And so together, they both love seeing their central bank flood their economy with cash and balloon the assets of the super rich in the urban centers while eating away at the wages of working class people. Why would prices suddenly and supernaturally go up? Well, look, supply and demand, screams out an economic genius on the Liberal side of the House. And from whence came that demand? Where'd the money come from? When the economy's just lost $100 billion, everyone's locked in their basement. Where'd the demand come from? Well, what do you know? It came from the printers in the government money-making machine. The money-making machine started printing cash in spring of 2020, and within weeks, real estate prices started to skyrocket. I reiterate, all the land that was transacted in those real estate purchases has been here for thousands of years. That can't be the result of a COVID supply chain quirk.
Somewhat fascinating when the member tries to lecture us all about basic economics. And what I would convey to the member is that, Canadians were at a time of need in which this government stepped up and provided programs, whether it was direct support through CERB, through businesses and wage loss program, rent subsidy programs, which, yes, cost billions of dollars. I concede it cost billions of dollars. Some within the Conservative/Reform Party would have liked us to not have supported Canadians and businesses. I'm wondering if the member would provide his true thoughts in regards to whether or not he believes that we should have supported families in Canada in all regions. Just the other day, we had members of his caucus saying there's hundreds of millions that we need to spend more in the province of BC, in which we will to support the province of BC. What does he think of that?
Carleton.
Well, of course, when the government deprives people of their income, it has to replace that income. We supported that at the very outset in spring of 2020. But what we did not support is having the biggest deficit in all the G20. All those other countries had COVID lockdowns as well. Many of them had lower unemployment and lower COVID mortality rates with a significantly lower deficit. Taiwan, for example, which responded in the way that Conservatives originally suggested, had among the lowest COVID mortality rates in the world and a deficit of 4% of GDP rather than 16% like this government. Yes, COVID forced them this government to spend. It didn't force them to give money to prisoners, to organized criminals. It did not force them to give wage subsidies to corporations that were already wealthy enough to pay out dividends and bonuses. Those were irresponsible decisions that no one, not even COVID, imposed. Everybody's asking the same question. Whether it's a 28-year-old couple living in their parents' basement because they can't afford the $300,000 increase in the average house price that has occurred since this government took office, or it's the single mother walking down the grocery aisle noticing that she can't afford nutritious food for her kids, or it is the senior that is watching his savings disappear as inflation gallops through his bank account and vaporizes what he spent a lifetime storing away for his golden years. All of them are asking the same question. Why are prices rising so fast? Even the finance minister has had the epiphany that there is an inflation crisis. In fact, just last fall, she said the greater risk was deflation, not inflation. She ignored my warnings to the contrary. And she was not alone in that false prophecy. The current and the former governors of the Bank of Canada, liberal journalists and liberal academics all laughed when I started warning about inflation back in May of 2020. But before we can answer why prices are rising today, I have to answer the other question that I often get is, how did I get it so right when so many others got it so wrong? Well, the answer is that the liberal academics, journalists, and the finance minister relied on ideology. I relied on empirical economic science. The man who wrote the book on inflation, the empirical economic scientist who won the Nobel Prize for it, Dr. Milton Friedman, published famous graphs in which he demonstrated a nearly perfect correlation between the rise in inflation and the increase in money supply per unit of economic output. And he showed that in those graphs, all 5 of them, the US, the UK, Germany, Japan, and Brazil, the correlation was nearly perfect. When there is more money chasing fewer goods, you always get higher prices. So when I saw this government beginning to print money to pay for exorbitant spending, I knew that inflation was just down the road. Now they said, no, those old rules don't apply. History is over. It no longer repeats itself, they said. We can ignore the thousands of years of economic history which has demonstrated this correlation again and again because we have reinvented the laws of economics. I was expecting them to introduce a law repealing a bill repealing the law of gravity, given their penchant for thinking that they could do away with the laws of economics. And so, of course, history has not been repealed, nor has economic law, and the massive influx of cash as a result of $500 billion of deficits has indeed driven up prices. Now, this is the funny part. The same people who said COVID would give us deflation now blame it for inflation. The same doctors who misdiagnosed the disease now tell us they can tell us that the disease's cause has nothing to do with them. Well, what is the cause? Well, some people say it is supply chain kinks resulting from COVID. And they point to the fact that other nations are also getting high levels of inflation. Therefore, it cannot be the government's fault here at home. Well, the truth is, other countries are getting inflation. Those countries that are doing the same stupid things that our government is doing are getting lots of inflation. And the correlation holds up even today. So, for example, yesterday the minister pointed out that other G20 countries have high levels of inflation, and she's right about that. Argentina has 52% inflation. Why? They've increased their money supply by 80% in a year and a half. Turkey has 20% inflation. Why? They've increased their money supply by 43%. Yes, the Americans south of the border, the money printing mammoths in Washington, have 6.2% inflation. Why? They've increased their money supply by 35%. And here in Canada, we have a two-decade high record of inflation, 4.7%, after here in this country we increased money supply by 23%. In fact, if you take the G20 countries and you put them on a graph, you see a near perfect correlation between money supply growth and inflation. Those countries that have flooded their economies with deficit spending have high inflation, and those countries who are also supply chain dependent but who have kept their money supply in control have low inflation. Let me give you an example. Japan's inflation is 0.2%. Why? Well, their money supply growth has been half of ours in relative terms. Saudi Arabia's inflation, 0.8%. Its money supply growth has been a third of ours. Switzerland, 1.2% inflation. Their money supply growth has been a mere quarter of ours, only 6.5%. So in other words, those countries that are not printing money to pay their bills have maintained a low cost of living and an affordable life for their citizens. And those countries that are flooding their economies with cheap cash are driving up the cost of living for their people. Now, Liberals will say, we had no choice, that COVID made them do it. Well, this will be their excuse for everything. Remember, he tried to give $500 million to a company, a group that had paid his family $500,000, and the Prime Minister said, oh, COVID made me do it. Well, COVID required we spend money, yes, but we didn't have to have the biggest deficit in the G20. All the other G20 countries had COVID too. COVID didn't force the Prime Minister to give CERB checks to wealthy families that didn't need it, to people who could have been working with over 500,000 vacant jobs, to prisoners, to organized criminals, and even to people that the public servants suspected of making fraudulent applications. He didn't have to give wage subsidies to large corporations that had so much money that they were simultaneously paying out dividends and bonuses to their executives. COVID didn't force any of that on this government. Those were decisions. This government knew, they could not pay for those decisions by simply borrowing from the marketplace. There wasn't enough money in the whole world to lend them enough to spend and fulfill their appetites. That is why they directed the Bank of Canada to create the cash out of thin air, which the bank, unfortunately, was all too happy to do. And now we see the consequences. Now that I've demonstrated through the correlation between money supply growth and inflation in the G20 countries, let me show you another piece of incontrovertible evidence that our inflation problem is not just the result of supply chain quirks. And that is this: the biggest inflation in our economy has been in an area where there is no supply chain. Land. Land is not waiting at a port. Land is not stuck on a ship. Land is not held hostage by a COVID outbreak in some faraway place. Land was supplied to us by geological forces here millions of years before we even arrived. It's right under our feet. and yet land prices are up 20%. How do you explain that? Is it that the acreage of land caught COVID and all of a sudden became more expensive? Of course not. Land prices started rising after the government started printing money. Let's get very specific here. In the first 2 months of COVID, real estate prices actually started to drop, which you'd expect. You would expect that when people's incomes fall, that when $100 billion disappears from the GDP, when people are afraid about their ability to earn a future living, and that when you shut off immigration altogether, thereby decreasing the supply, the demand for real estate, that prices would go down. In fact, CMHC, our housing authority, predicted there would be a 14% reduction in housing prices. Made sense to predict that at the time. But then, all of a sudden, in May of 2020, real estate prices started to rise. Why? In the middle of a lockdown, when people can't even go and see the properties that they are buying, why would prices suddenly and supernaturally go up? Well, look, supply and demand, screams out an economic genius on the Liberal side of the House. And from whence came that demand? Where'd the money come from? When the economy's just lost $100 billion, everyone's locked in their basement. Where'd the demand come from? Well, what do you know? It came from the printers in the government money-making machine. The money-making machine started printing cash in spring of 2020, and within weeks, real estate prices started to skyrocket. I reiterate, all the land that was transacted in those real estate purchases has been here for thousands of years. That can't be the result of a COVID supply chain quirk. The housing was already here before COVID came. In fact, about 96% of the houses in Canada today were built before COVID, and therefore the cost of their construction it is chronologically impossible to blame it on the COVID phenomenon. In other words, it is not supply and demand, as my friend suggests, it is simply demand. Demand driven by the massive creation of money, $400 billion of it, the biggest money supply increase since the first Trudeau caused runaway double-digit inflation in the 70s and 80s. And so we now have incontrovertible evidence that it is decisions of this government, which I grant are being replicated by other irresponsible big spending governments around the world, that are causing the inflation that we see today. And what are the consequences of that inflation? Well, we see it. First of all, a massive growing gap between rich and poor. If you're rich, you love inflation. Why do you think the big banks have been so thrilled with the money printing policies of this government? It's funny. Bob Fife actually went on CTV the other day, and he said, Bay Street is not happy with the member of Parliament for Carleton being appointed the finance critic. Of course Bay Street's not happy, because I'm the one that's been speaking out against all the free money that the government has been pumping into the financial system, inflating their assets and letting them arbitrage a profit between the price of a bond the government sells them and the higher price for which the Bank of Canada buys it back. Of course, Bay Street doesn't like the fact that I'm speaking out against that. The good news is, I don't care what Bay Street likes. I work for Main Street here in this House of Commons. So, yes, the financial elites are thrilled with quantitative easing. They've loved it in the United States of America, but Washington and Wall Street love quantitative easing. It's the one thing that gets bipartisan support in Washington, right? Republicans love ballooning Wall Street, and Democrats love ballooning Washington. And so together, they both love seeing their central bank flood their economy with cash and balloon the assets of the super rich in the urban centers while eating away at the wages of working class people. And this Prime Minister looks across the border at the growing gap between rich and poor, at the higher cost of living, at the poor and the young who can never live where the jobs are because real estate prices are too high, and he says, let's have some of that up here. And he replicates the same disastrous policies that have led to so much social and economic division south of the border. Here on this side of the House of Commons, we don't believe in central bank money printing to pay our bills. During the Great Global Recession, we rejected that approach. Governments around the world decided to do it. Here in Canada, we did run modest deficits, the smallest in the G7, but we did it borrowing real money and returning quickly to a balanced budget, which meant we had low inflation and low unemployment and the fastest recovery from the Great Global Recession. It turns out that sound money does not just keep inflation low, it allows growth and job creation. We know that inflation doesn't just eat away at paychecks, it kills jobs. For example, we now have among the highest unemployment in the G7, combined with 1 million vacant jobs. Can you imagine that? High unemployment and record high job vacancies? Well, no wonder. When they print money to pay people not to work, what do you get? Jobs without people and people without jobs. And of course, all of the money that is going into the economy to pay people not to work means more spending with less making, which means higher prices. We need to do exactly the opposite, Mr. Speaker. We need to restore sound money. Stop printing cash. Get the Bank of Canada focused on its real mandate, which is low inflation. Bring government spending under control. Cancel the $100 billion slush fund the government has created for the post-COVID period, and return the cost of government to the pre-COVID levels. Simply put, a more affordable government will mean a more affordable cost of living for Canadians. And that is what Conservatives have always supported. Instead of creating more cash, why don't we create more of the stuff cash buys? Unleash our energy sector to supply more affordable energy to our consumers and more paychecks to our workers. Approve pipelines to create jobs for Western energy workers and Eastern refinery workers. Get the carbon tax and other red tape off the back of our farmers so they can produce more nutritious and affordable food. Incentivize our municipalities to speed up building permits so that we can build more houses rather than just pushing out more mortgage lending. And sell off 15% of the underutilized 37,000 federal buildings so that there is more space for housing our young and our working class. Here in this city of our nation's capital, we have massively underutilized real estate that could be used for private sector, affordable housing built in the free market to supply our youth with opportunity to live in an affordable place. In other words, we need to move from a debt economy to a paycheck economy. We need to make more and cost less. We need to unleash the free enterprise system to supply our workers with paychecks and our consumers with affordable...
Don't forget to like, dislike, subscribe, and comment. Safe Space Cafe. And always, have a good day.